shall I render to the Lord for all his bounty to me?
Welcome to Veiled in Grace. I'm Kyra.
And I'm Anna. We are Cradle Orthodox Christians
And we're here to talk about what it's like to be Orthodox women.
in a very non-Orthodox world.
And we've got a hot topic today. Children in the church. Everyone's got a strong opinion on it. But the Lord said, this is Matthew 19:14, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven."
So, we often forget that Jesus placed a child in the middle of the disciples. This is the typical Orthodox iconography for that passage that Kyra read. And so we have Christ, and this is, tradition tells us, is Saint Ignatius. And I'm not sure if we know who the other children are or not. But then we have the other disciples around. And this helps remind us all that the children belong in the church, worshiping alongside us, and that it is their church too.
So in the Orthodox faith, people get a little taken aback by the fact that we baptize our children as infants. But really, Scripture says to go out and baptize the families. It doesn't say to go out and baptize the adults and leave the children at home. Children are part of the families. So we don't really believe in having our children wait until they are of a decision age to decide to be participants in the faith. Naturally, we know as adults that you do, even though you are already baptized, have a point in your life where you come into the fullness of the faith more, and you really in your heart understand it and start to accept more what the faith that you were raised in. But the church has so many beautiful things that we offer to everyone. We shouldn't be preventing our children from participating in receiving the Eucharist and receiving the sacraments and being participants in the church. And it's a very hard concept for some people to understand because children are different than adults. They are developmentally very different than adults. They can't be still in the way that adults do, or in the length of time that adults do. And they have wiggles in them. They have different mindsets and different things that are going on in their brain during a Divine Liturgy or any church service than in ours. But the beautiful part of worship in the Orthodox Church is that we do not separate our children and say, "Hi, welcome to church. You're going to go here and learn about God here, and we're going to go over in this room and learn about God here." We welcome the families and we say, "Come in, find a place with your children, and let your children pray in the way that you are praying."
And worship the same way. And know that they are welcome and a part of this family, and they are, born whole persons. Why would they not be a part of it?
But I will be the first to say that raising children in the church is very, very, very difficult. I'll throw one more very in there.
The struggle is real.
Spiritually, physically, I jokingly but not jokingly leave every single church service sweating and feel like I just ran a marathon, because it's a different cross to bear than what adults experience in church.
Yeah, I was thinking this morning at the feast day liturgy.
At the time that we're recording this, this morning we celebrated the entrance of the Theotokos.
Yes. And there were a few toddlers, and I was like, it's that age 1 to 3 is so tough. So tough. Because it's just constant wandering.
Yeah. And there's a dynamic to it that changes over time. So parents often feel hesitation, and I know it because I feel it myself, and I know it because I read about it from a lot of other mothers online, Orthodox mothers, all the time, that they often just don't want to go to church because they don't feel like their children are welcome in the church. And they feel judged by people around them because of how children act. And the hard part is that it's not to say that there isn't judgment from other people. Like, you pray and you wish that there won't be, but the reality is that it is really difficult for other people, especially those that are not used to being around young children, to have to center and focus themselves when there's a lot of young children around. So different churches approach children in the church in different ways. I grew up in a church that had pews, and we stood in the pew with our family. So there wasn't a lot of movement going on with children per se around the church. There was not a lot of like walking around or venerating different icons or like active participation in aspects of the liturgy. Was your church similar growing up?
My church was very small, so it was just a couple families. So there was just a handful of us kids, and there weren't pews, there were just some chairs. So it was a little more open just because it was a small space to begin with. And I believe there was carpeting too, which doesn't create as much sound.
It muffles the little feet.
So I don't know that it was a huge issue, maybe. I do remember, though, sitting on the choir stand during the church service. Like, that's where I would sit. And, you know, now I sing in the choir and help direct it when my dad isn't able to. So that's kind of my only real memories of being in the church. I always felt welcome, though. I never felt like people were on our case about how we were acting. Although it was usually about like dress, since I didn't wear dresses as a little girl.
Anna, how dare you?
I was a tomboy, so that's what I remember is like some of the older parishioners would lovingly say, "Don't you wear dresses?"
Yeah.
But everybody was welcoming of children, at least.
I think in this episode we're going to get in some of the specifics of like what it looks like to have children in the church and our children in the church. But before we even go deeper into that, I think it's important for everyone listening that if you don't have children, you need to do your best to be accepting of the children. And sometimes that is going to be a challenge for you. If you do have children, then you need to push aside a little bit the thoughts from the evil one of I should not be here because my children will be loud, or they will be this, or they will be that because they are children.
Or you might upset someone. So what?
I struggle with that a lot. I struggle with not wanting anyone to be upset with how my children are acting, but also trying to honor and be respectful of where my children are at. Because it is not developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old to stand in a church service and be silent and not make any noises and not move at all. But I also don't come to church to sit in a little room in the back of the church the whole service because that's the only place that my children can move around at. So I love how our church is laid out. We have removed probably about half of the pews in our church. So we have a few rows of pews for elderly, infirmed people that need them, or visitors that are not familiar with a church setting that does not have pews. But the front of our church is very open, and it leaves room for children to be engaged in the church service. So my children tend to, I try to stick with I'm going to keep them close by to the best of my ability, in a, hopefully within arm's reach. But sometimes my kids are doing things that are very calm and peaceful, like walking and sensing people in the church with a little play sensor. And to someone, it might look like they're just playing or that they're being a distraction. But really, that's them, that's a 2-year-old focusing. That's a 2-year-old putting their attention on something that they're doing. And as a parent, the best thing to do is to encourage your children to be active participants in the church. And then if you find that they are causing a disruption, you can try to redirect. You can try to walk them around to venerate different icons, which we have a lot of icons that are at perfect child level. Or if they're really being too disruptive, then you can remove them from the church for a little breather, but always come back in.
Yeah, I remember my priest in New York, the one little boy was kind of, wandering around, and I think it was probably during the sermon or maybe after, during announcements, and he's like, this is his church too. Just take off his shoes so it doesn't make noise because it's wood floors. He's like, and they're allowed to roam around as long as they're not running or stomping or, but as long as they're being respectful, movement is fine. I mean, we see movement even with adults. We come in. It's not like everyone has to come in right on time, even though you're supposed to. But you can venerate icons, you can light candles. There's times, when the priest is not out in the nave and he's in the altar, you can have the freedom to move around. So it's very acceptable in the Orthodox Church to have children kind of moving around the nave as needed to kind of help them not, get pent up energy. And I always say it's, a little noise is fine and acceptable. It's if they start screaming loudly and won't stop, you just take them out for a breather. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. And that too, parents have to respect their child. If they need to take a little break, let them take a little break. They need some fresh air or whatever the situation is, your child best. And, depending on your church situation, you might have a large narthex or a family room, but if you don't, you might have to go outside or to a hall or whatever, whatever your situation is. And that's okay. And I on our bulletin, we had gotten it from a different church, but it says, we have a family room. If you need to cry, it's okay.
It's okay. Not the children.
Yeah.
The parents.
It's okay for your children to see their parents be human and cry, because sometimes we all need a little break. So
church
be respectful.
Hard.
Yes.
Church is hard for children, but church is also very hard for the parents of those children.
Right. Yeah. And so it's okay if you have to come and go. Or even sometimes you might, especially if it's in an evening service and it's late, you might have to just leave early because it's bedtime, and that's okay. You could there were plenty of times where we would just come for the first half hour and be like, okay, and we're going back to bed. But
I've had many Vesper services that I am overwhelmed and it's late at night and my kids are getting tired and they're starting to get squirrely and someone's trying to run in place and the other one's trying to roll around and the other one is like, if you hold me, I will scream. And I stop and I just look around and I get frustrated. I do, because I'm like, why am I even here? Why am I even bothering? But then I notice that and remember that I'm at least trying. I could have stayed home.
And they'll remember coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could have stayed home. I could have done nothing. I could have said, it's going to be difficult. I don't like difficult things. I'm just not going to come. But that's exactly what God's trying to teach us, is that you have to get through the struggles and through the difficult things to see the beauty that can come from that. Because my children aren't always going to be in that phase of acting a little more rambunctious. I mean, your children are now, how old is your oldest?
12, 9, and 6.
Yeah. So you're seeing the fruit of like where I am right now, where my children are very active. You get a few years down the road and you have children that know how to participate in the service, and you have children that know how to stand for a little while silently, and you have children that know how to self-regulate if they are getting overwhelmed or need a breather, and already know how to give themselves a break from the liturgy, or find a prayer rope to use, or something else if they're really struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, and they still move and roam, and it's my situation. I sing in the choir, and my husband is in the nave, but he's also in the hospitality ministry, so he has to help get coffee hours set up and whatnot. So we had to recently kind of establish ground rules for the boys. If daddy has to go over to the kitchen to check on food or whatever, you need to either stay in the nave or be up in the choir loft with me. You can't just be like hanging out in the narthex or roaming around, or, so, and they're at that age now, they'll respect that for the most part. Sometimes they need gentle reminders. But
setting expectations for your children and how they should behave in church is reasonable, though. And setting those expectations based on their age is also reasonable. What is expected of my children is not going to be what you necessarily expect of your children. I'm at the point that, like with my 4-year-old, I'm trying to teach you can't leave the nave without asking me or telling me where you would like to go, because we went through the phase of like something popped in his mind that, he needed to go get a prayer book. And so, he just turns around and runs away to go get a prayer book. And with a 2-year-old, what is the expectation of a 2-year-old? Generally, the expectation for my 2-year-old is that we have a quiet voice
and no running
and walking feet. Yes, like that is what I expect of my 2-year-old. Someone might look at my 2-year-old in a service and say that they were wild, but to me, if he used walking feet and a quiet voice for the whole service, that's a major win.
Yeah.
And for my 6-year-old, staying close by, standing for as long as you can, and trying to pay attention. It's good to give children different parts of the liturgy to pay attention and look forward to. I remember when we were working on church school lessons for some of our pre-teens, basically, trying to form lessons on the order of the liturgy. And the order of the liturgy can be taught to very young children. And it's good to teach them that, because then they're paying attention for it. They aren't just waiting for communion and knowing when communion's going to happen. They're waiting for the great entrance, and they know what the great entrance is. I remember being up in the choir and with you and listening to you ask your children if they wanted to go participate in the procession for the great entrance. You didn't just say, okay, go downstairs and do this or that. It was like identifying the part of the liturgy that they're in so that they know what part of the liturgy they are in, and preparing themselves for what to come.
And it helps children once they start getting to their tween and teen years and they start questioning all the things. It helps them better understand why they're there and why the liturgy might be kind of long sometimes. And, because
the meaning.
Right, the meaning behind it and why it is all existing. Because, if you don't really understand that, it is a little like, oh, why does it need to be that long? Why is it, because you just don't understand what the purpose of all that is. So that education is important, just to help them understand and appreciate the different parts. And now I see it with my two older boys, mainly my 12-year-old who helps ring the bells. He knows at what points of the service bells are being rung and if he can help do that. So it gives him that opportunity, as well as helping my husband with any hospitality needs. He knows what time during those parts of the service that might happen. So it just gives them a little more, they just feel included more and understand better when they are involved, like holding the flags during a procession or ringing the bells or even serving in the altar is
Holding a candle during the epistle reading.
Holding the candle, being involved, or passing the baskets for the offering. And then obviously little boys serving in the altar, that will really help them understand what's going on in different parts, because there's a lot more involvement of work to be done.
Some churches, I think, because there's always this changing dynamic of ages in a church. I mean, we 5 years ago had a lot of elderly people. Now we've had a lot of elderly people pass away in recent years, and now we have a lot of really young people in our church. It can be easy for a church community to overlook the fact that the dynamic of the church is changing if your leadership of the church is not fully on top of that. And so I would encourage parents that if you go to a church that, you obviously have your children, if you have your young children there, and even if you're the only ones, but especially if there are other young children, and you feel like your children are not very engaged in the service, I would encourage you to find a way that they can be engaged in the service. And it might be something like sitting down and talking to your priest about different ways that children can become active participants of the liturgy. Because for an adult to be an active participant of the liturgy looks different than for a child to be an active participant of the liturgy. Because for children, my husband always jokes and says, like with our children, that he's like, oh, he's not actually seeing or hearing anything that you're saying unless he's doing it. And that's how children learn. A lot of children learn through playing, and they learn through doing. They don't learn through listening and watching as much as we do. They haven't honed in on those skills in the same way that we have. So if your church does not have a lot of ways for your children to be active participants, speak to your priest about small things that you could add in to your services that would allow your children to be active participants. If you do an offering collection at some point during your liturgy, ask your priest if it would be allowed to either have the child participate with that, or because, some churches will not allow children to do something like that until they're like a teenager. But at that point, you've missed this prime window of teaching them and making them feel like they're included. If you ask, can you put me on your schedule to do the offering collection, and I can bring my child with me? Can I walk the little kid with me to do it and show them and allow them to participate? When we have the epistle reading, are we able to get some candles and have our children hold the candles? Like small t things that give the children an opportunity. And our church, just by nature, because we have so many young children and more always coming, we kind of have just gradually added in more opportunities for our children to participate. Or talk to your choir director and see if they're okay with having, a 6 or 7 year old come up, someone that, isn't going to be overly disruptive. But start your kids when they're young. If you wait until your kids are teenagers,
They'll be over it.
Yeah. There's no interest at that point. The spark of excitement in them begins when they're a young child. It's why we baptize them when they're a young child, and not because we baptize them and they're on their own journey, but because we baptize them and now it is our responsibility and the godparents' responsibility and the church community's responsibility to raise the children in the faith until they are of that age that they have learned how to do it for themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, and also something to point out, around age 7, when a child's brain and I guess even soul kind of switches from living in fantasy, imaginary land to morality, understanding morals. So we don't expect our children under that age to really understand and grasp deep morality. That's why it's a gentle, long-term goals of gently guiding our children in the way they should go, not expecting them to act like adults or to remember things right away. So around age 7, then we do have them start participating in confession, because that is the best way for them to understand that morality issues that we all have. Mm-hmm. And then they feel even more involved in the church because now they're an active participant in that sacrament of confession. And I know you had grown up with a nice tradition when they turned 7. I don't know if you want to explain that.
Yeah, right around that age that, similar to how the Roman Catholic Church has kind of like a celebration for children that are receiving their first communion, my church had a tradition of like celebrating the children who were receiving their first confession, because it wasn't something that they just went to. They learned about confession and they talked about it with their church school teachers and with their parents, and then they prepared for it and they talked to their priest about it. And it's a scary experience for children to go through something like that. And so
and adults
and adults, yes. But as children, like it was something that they practiced and prepared for. And so after we received our first confession or took part in our first confession, they had like a little blessing that they would get us a cake, and we would wear little like white gowns and get candles and like a prayer book and just something to help us remember the importance of introducing new sacraments into your life. And I still remember, it just being like a celebratory thing, because confession is part of your salvation. So why wouldn't you celebrate becoming of age to participate in such a beautiful sacrament?
Yeah. And so, because I was having issues with my one son, very scared about confession. And so he was 10 and still
Me too.
refused to go. So that's when I reached out to Kyra and I'm like, is there any way we can do something to help encourage that? And that's when she told me about this idea. And so we decided to kind of implement it into the church school curriculum around that age. And then you had given like gifted little books from, Ancient Faith, I think, publishing about their first confession. So it's the books now that we go through before they go to confession to remember all of our sins. And
we're a couple of years off from some more children becoming 7. So Anna's just reminding me of the things that I need to do for the next group of children.
Yeah, but it helped him. He finally went because there was going to be cake.
There was going to be cake.
And it was going to be a celebration, and that he was going to do this. So he did this with his 7-year-old brother. Then they did it together.
Yeah.
And so that really helped him, take that first step toward accepting responsibility for our actions. And, it's still kind of a struggle, but at least he knows he's done it and survived.
Not everything that happens in the church is rainbows and butterflies.
Right.
And it can be difficult to instill that in children who like rainbows and butterflies when they get older, to become more aware of their own actions and become more aware of their own life. And that is like when you're saying when they really start to have a deeper understanding of the church, but they aren't learning things like that without being in the church. If all they do is they come to church and are told that they have to go to confession or they have to do this or they have to do that, then they'll be more scared of church. The people that I know that will tell me that their children have a hard time coming to church, but they only come to church every 2 months, your children aren't used to it. They don't know what to expect. You can't expect them to behave like perfect angels if they are not ever in church and they never experience it and they never practice it and they never
coming regularly. And again, like last episode, the little church at home just helps them understand why we're in church in the first place and how to act in both places, whether you're at your prayer corner at home or in the Divine Liturgy on a Sunday morning.
Can you imagine what it would be like for our children if we just sent them away to a different place to pray than we prayed until they were 15, and then now you can come pray with us? That would be confusing.
Yeah.
Why was how we were praying when we were a kid not the same as how we're praying now? It's why we have our children with us, because they should be getting to experience the full beauty of a divine liturgy that we are. The wonderful part about the Divine Liturgy that we also talk about in our church school with the children is that it caters to all of your senses. It caters to your sight. You're surrounded by beautiful icons. It caters to your sense of smell. You are breathing in incense and the smell of beeswax candles. It caters to your ears, because you are hearing the bells, you are hearing the chants, you are hearing the people sing. It caters to your taste. You are receiving the body and blood of Christ. It caters to your touch in many different ways. Prostrations and venerating icons and crossing yourself. And that's how children learn too. It's how we are all active participants in the liturgy, is because it's catering to all of our senses. There's no better place for the children to be than in an environment that we are in that is catering to all of our senses.
Yeah. So I'd say some tips for parents. It's completely acceptable to bring, like, a lot of people have like a little church bag for young children that maybe it's special items that is only on Sundays, so they don't ever see it throughout the week, but it's just for church. Or if you're fortunate enough to have a family room that might have some items in it, but anything quiet. Children learn by keeping their hands busy.
We have prayer ropes that we hold and use during the service when we have a hard time focusing.
So, anything from like a fidget spinner to felt things or the little sensors or a puzzle or something, that's okay. As long as, again, it's quiet. Don't think that a child is not listening or paying attention or understanding simply because they're doing something different with their hands at the time. Because it amazes me every time. Like, even when we're doing lessons at home, and when they're fixated on like building a Lego or something, but they'll be able to recite a whole 10 lines of a Bible back to me, word for word, even though I didn't think they were paying any attention, So they are taking it in, even if they are playing or drawing or something at the same time. So I think it tends to, people might think that they're playing. They're playing or being disrespectful. And that's not the case.
It's understanding the mentality of how children develop, and how they learn. A lot of times they have to be doing something like that to understand and to focus. And it's good and okay to teach them how to focus and be still without that. But that takes time.
You can't expect an hour and a half of that.
You can't expect an hour. I went home after church a few weeks ago, very frustrated, because I know that people were frustrated with a child of mine who was very hyper and has a lot of energy, similarly to me as a child. And I was just frustrated because sometimes you put it on yourselves that people think that your child has to be still this whole service. And I remember looking it up and reminding and talking to my husband about how for a 4-year-old, if you can get 10 minutes is a long time. If you can get even 6 minutes, it said, of being quiet and staying generally in the same area, that's a success. So an hour and a half, and if you add matins on top of that, or orthos that some churches also do, you could have your children there for a long time. It's humbling being a parent of young children.
Yeah, so I think obviously if you're a mother and a father together, it's easier. But oftentimes we have situations where it's not that way, either a mother or a father bringing their children on their own because maybe a spouse isn't Christian and not, willing to come. And then, or we have, like in our situations, like we sing in the choir or serve in the altar or, no, we don't serve, but the husband serve in the altar, So, and then you might be on your own. Or if you're coming on feast days when your husband's at work, you're on your own, or anytime you might have to come without children or without help, and then you're outnumbered. So it's always a good thing to try to have somebody appointed to help you on those times, whether that's one of your children's godparents or your godparent.
Me trying to send my 2-year-old today to go see you, and he just walked right past you. I was like, go see Anna, go see Anna, go see Anna.
And or a teen, we have a lovely teen girl who is so motherly and loves to care and help out with all the toddlers and babies. So, but don't expect people to do that because people don't know where to, some people are a little more apprehensive about other people touching or talking to their children. So ask someone if you need help. And that way you can easily be like, your turn, help me out. Or they'll just be more aware of it because that is the thing, the rest of adults are trying to focus and not be distracted by the children who are all moving about. So we might not even necessarily even notice that they need assistance,
Are lighting their hair on fire.
Right. Like,
the amount of times that your youngest, I remember when you and your husband were like, yeah, we unfortunately have had to take a break from holding a real candle during the epistle because we are on week 5 of burning our hair in the middle of the epistle on accident.
Yeah. So, I mean, you'll see adults who they might happen to see the toddler run away from their parents and about to grab a lit candle or whatever, and they'll step in. That's a time where it's acceptable to try to stop the child from running or to help because that could be a dangerous situation. Yeah. I do remember one time a newer family came and they had 2 younger kids and they were both starting to gain traction and start running circles.
And then they see you trying to come get them.
And they were outnumbered. So I just kind of stopped the one, until the parent could get to them or whatever. And then I was like, oh, I hope I didn't offend them by stopping their child. So afterwards I'm like, please forgive me if I crossed the line, but it looked like you could use some assistance in stopping. Yeah. She's like, oh gosh, no, anytime, please stop my children from, from creating chaos. So, it's that line of don't expect other people to help you because they might not even be paying attention or notice that you need help. So don't take offense to it. So just have somebody that you can ask. Like the one time when your son and nephew were both running circles, I had no idea. I was just paying attention to the announcements. You're like, can you please help me? Yeah.
I just walk in with one child under my arm and the other one that I'm trying to catch, and I'm like, Anna! It's like, anybody?
As we're all just
and no one's paying any attention.
So, I mean, it's a good thing. Yeah. Yes, it's a good thing because people aren't letting it distract them or anger them or,
I'm just crying in the back. Sweating and crying. And
so, give people grace on both sides.
So my personal situation for church is I love community. I am full on my husband was born into community, people living in community. And if we had the setup for that, would totally be for it. I love that people are moving closer to our church. We're all, not all of us, but a lot of families of young children, especially at our church, have even moved closer or are close, like within 15 minutes of each other. And I like people helping. I am all for people helping because, I guess to back up for a minute, before my current situation, I had to humble myself to realize that, and with the help of Anna reminding me that your role in the church changes with the age of your children and the number of your children, because your responsibility when you have children now becomes helping the salvation of your children and focusing a lot less on yourself. I grew up singing in the choir. I love to sing. I sang in many choirs, in school, after school, all sorts of things. And I loved singing in the church choir. I got married. I came here, still singing in the church choir. I had one child, still singing in the church choir. I had 2 children, still singing in the church choir. It's really difficult, even with 2 children, to try to be singing in a church choir. And I selfishly was like, I do not want to stop singing in the church choir. And you were like, it's just a little break. You'll come back to it. And I was like, I don't want a little break. I'm fine. But it's humbling to do a little self-reflection and realize that your responsibility becomes your children. You need to meet your children where they are at and set yourself up for success in the best way that you can. How do I set myself up for success? I make it very well known to everybody in the church that you are all welcome. You are all welcome to help me with my children if I am drowning, which is always. Like, you see a kid running. My husband's godson is a teenager, one of them, and I think last week at Vespers, he must have stopped my 2-year-old like 4 times. Like, he very stealthily would just... And the 2-year-old never saw it coming and would just hold him there until we could catch up, because a 2-year-old that is using wonderful walking feet about 3 feet away from you realizes that they're 3 feet away from you, and then they take off running. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be then chasing the 3-year-old, and the parents don't want to be chasing the child through the church because then it's even more disruptive. So like, if they're running, just like a little arm, and then I'll come help them.
Yeah. And I know, like, I didn't mind if somebody yeah, put their arm or
like,
foot
I'll
out to
parent them,
stop
just
my children. But I was more on that side of I didn't like passing babies around or things like that. Like, I was very more protective of my children, or controlling. I should use the term controlling.
Anna wanted to do things for her own children. I am a little more
and that's fine. But that's why I said, like,
styles.
You need to ask for help, because some people just don't.
And different people also, like, when you're talking about like bringing little things to church, like, people have different opinions on what is or isn't okay in church. Mm-hmm. And we also shouldn't judge people on what they decide to do in church. Like, so for my own family, I've read many articles from even bishops that say, like, bring a little thing of Cheerios for your kid to eat if they're fine. Well, I can tell you my children would behave. They would sit and not make a whole peep the entire church service if I fed them Cheerios the whole time. But it's not really teaching them anything other than that they get to eat in church. And then at some point when I tell them that they can't eat in church, they're not going to be happy about it. So, like, for me personally, I never feed my children in church. The only time that my kids eat in church is like when they're breastfed. And after that point, it's like finding something little to do with their hands. But
yeah, I think I only one time, because it was that Holy Saturday when it's like a few hours long, that I like let my toddler have a snack in the middle of it just for everyone's sanity. But I think that was literally the only time I've ever
I'm just not a big food in church kind of person. Like, my husband is also like he thinks that like teaching our children that blessed bread and Holy Communion and what we're receiving in church should be all we're receiving in church. Some people don't feel that way. Some priests and bishops and metropolitans also are fine with that. So like, talk to your priest. I'm just saying my personal opinion on it is that I don't do that, partially because I know that my kids are messy too. And so like being considerate of other things, like, just eating blessed bread after receiving communion, I have had to teach my children how to like put it on a tissue so that they can clean up after themselves and not make a mess of blessed bread. But I mean, this morning was a prime example of, before liturgy, my 2-year-old only woke up 30 minutes before we left, and so he was still nibbling on cereal on our way to church and did not want me to pry it out of his hands getting out of the car. So I wasn't going to put up a huge fight because he's 2. So when we got into the church, I told him he could have it, but we sat in the back room. We didn't bring it into the church and crush Cheerios everywhere. But I'm all for...
You choose your battles.
You choose your battles. Like you if you don't set yourself up for success and you are fighting yourself, then you're going to make it even more difficult on yourself. I often am in the church watching my children by myself. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old who sometimes is serving in the altar, sometimes isn't. And at this point, I am 19 weeks pregnant with my 4th child. So, woohoo, surprise. And my husband is generally serving in the altar, which is great for the health of our spiritual family. My children love watching him serve in the altar. He's, enrolled in a diaconal program, so we're going down that path. And, but it means that I often am pregnant with 3 children and watching them all on my own. So that's why, I'm a big believer in, if you want to help, go right ahead and help. But I also have tried to just have grace for myself in that, my children are acting like children. Sometimes they are not acting in the most well-behaved way or are being deliberately defiant. And then, that gets approached a little differently. But for the most part, do your best. Mm-hmm. Come to church. I just spoke for, 45 minutes or something like that with a new family that Anna was introducing me to after service last Sunday. And they have 2 young children also that I think were 4 and 2 or maybe 4 and younger. And the mom was like, yeah, I would like to come to a Vespers, but my husband was working and I wasn't sure about coming by myself. And I'm like, come. Why not? Just because you're by yourself doesn't mean that you shouldn't come. What would happen if, God forbid, your husband died or your husband doesn't want to come to church with you? You're not going to just stop bringing your children to church, or you shouldn't just stop bringing your children to church. It's hard to go.
Yeah, and another part of that story I love is they were going to a local mega church, and which was welcoming of children, but I think it was just a little too overwhelming for them. And then they tried to go to a small church near that, right on their road, and they basically were told, you have children, you probably won't feel welcome here, or that you aren't welcome here. So they didn't go. Yeah. And then they happened to see our sermon on the internet, and
with
it was
my children probably walking back and forth across
and they saw
crossing themselves
they saw
as they
and
went.
Children in the church during the sermon, seeing them walking around,
Grandpa holding someone.
And so the husband was like, I think we found our church. We'll be welcome here. And that's that just really warmed my heart. Our
children are the future.
Yeah.
Our children are the future of this faith.
We have a saying in the Orthodox Church, or maybe other churches, but if you don't hear crying, the church is dying.
Yeah.
So,
but it's true.
Yeah.
It's it's just, if you don't have children in the church, where's your church going to be in 15, 20 years? Mm-hmm. And if you're shunning people with children and making them not feel welcome, then where is your church going to be when you are on your deathbed and you have turned away all of the kids?
Yeah.
Jesus didn't turn away the children.
Yeah. No, I mean, even with parenting in general, I try to remind myself, what would Jesus do? Or what would the saints do? What have the saints said about how children and how we're supposed to respond to children? It's not what most people think. It's, our society has more of that authoritative idea. Not that there's anything wrong with authority, but when it comes to parenting, we do need to remember the guidance of Christ and the saints, and it's all based on a reflection of you and how you are and how you respond to your children is how they ultimately will be brought up and turn out as adults based on how you are around them and how you respond to them. So if you're overly authoritative or demanding or strict, it's everyone's natural reaction to rebel and to go against that. So there has to be a loving balance of discipline and realistic expectations. I had an experience recently at a monastery when we went to the Monastery of the Holy Transfiguration in Elwood City for St. Olga's feast day. And I went alone with my 3 boys and my 13-year-old goddaughter. And it has been a while since I had been in church alone with my children, like without my husband.
Or a lot of people that you know to help.
Right. Or that they were comfortable. So we're in a different church, and oh gosh, trying to keep them from not picking on each other. Like we were all there was 2 boys sitting in front of me, and then I had my youngest son with me and my goddaughter next to me. And, she's just standing quiet and attentively the whole time, just so nice and respectful. And then my children are just, everyone. And I'm constantly stop it, stop it, stop it. Meanwhile, there's this family over on the other side with 2 boys that are just standing straight, tall, don't move the whole time. And I'm trying not to. So at one point, I'm oh, they're ringing bells. Let's go outside and watch the bells being rung, just to get them kind of break it up a little for them, because they just couldn't stop touching each other.
Every child is different too. So to have, one family might have boys that do tend to be more
I don't get it,
and
but
quiet in nature. We don't really know what that's like. We have boys that like to try to skydive off of things that are not meant for that.
Yeah.
And it's just, meeting yourself where you're at, knowing that God sees us trying, and realizing that our children belong. It's where they're meant to be. It's where we should be taking them. St. John Chrysostom says that parents should raise children to love the church and prayer from their earliest days. And it's what we're all trying to do. And I know a lot of parents are struggling, and a lot of parents really feel like they're in the thick of it. You're not alone.
Yeah. Because if it's not a positive experience for your children, they're not going to want to come, especially once they're teens. They're not going to want to come if they didn't have that positive experience, or they felt you getting upset at them constantly, which guilty. I've done it. Been there, but
I've never done that.
So overall, you want it to be a positive experience for them.
It's difficult, I find, reminding myself that certain situations don't merit disciplining my children for. If they're acting out in a certain way, and we see the people around us looking at us, and then we you get angry and you want to discipline your child, and just taking a deep breath and remembering that they are still a child. And there's one sweet woman in our parish that she likes watching my 4-year-old dance around and just be happy and be excited and enjoy being in church. Yeah. And feel comfortable and they're welcome there. My kids are excited to go to church. Probably more excited than I am usually to go to church. My 2-year-old on the way to church this morning has already now started to ask if he gets to serve in the altar.
Aww.
I serve today. And I'm maybe in a few years. Yeah. Maybe once you learn how to walk without tripping. Not quite yet.
Yeah, and we've had a few autistic children, teens, adults, and sometimes I think people give more grace to those types of people because it's a physical
something
difference that they can see, and so then they have empathy. But sometimes you have to remember there might be things you don't see about someone's child, and they might be struggling, and So to try to reserve that judgment on those children, because again, they are icons of Christ. And so whatever judgment you have against that child or that parent is a judgment against Christ, because they were created in his image. And so we need to try to remind ourselves to be as loving and compassionate and empathetic and patient as possible. And if you find yourself getting distracted by children and then getting upset by it, it's always best just to talk with your priest in private, and that way he can discern if maybe a family does need kind of like gentle guidance on how to be in church, or if you are the one having a difficult time keeping your focus in the worship, and not because of children, but that's more something that you might have to work on. So it's always best, just like anything in Orthodoxy, if you have a question or an issue, ask your priest.
We need to build a culture where children are loved in the church, not just tolerated in the church. Because without the children, we don't have a church.
Yeah. So there are times during the Divine Liturgy that if you're trying to figure out what would be appropriate or not appropriate, it's basically any time that like you need to really be paying attention to the words. So the epistle or gospel readings, the sermon, the consecration of the gifts.
The whole service.
Well, those are like the main parts, or the Lord's Prayer or the Creed,
Yes.
the main parts that our attention should be very strong, and that you can't necessarily just follow along in your book if you don't hear something,
Yeah.
Those would be the times that if your child is really starting to get out of control, you might want to go take a little break, just out of respect for everybody so they can hear what's going on. But otherwise, when it's not during those times, like, it's funny because like being in the choir loft, we oftentimes won't necessarily see what's happening because we're busy, but like we
Until
hear
you
it.
hear a loud
Yeah, and
thump.
then you hear, sometimes it's like super chaotic. We're like, is it a full moon?
And
It's like,
sometimes it's just one of my children attempting to venerate an icon and then accidentally falling and knocking over 4 of them in the process.
no, but it is interesting. Like it tends to be like random, and honestly, it usually is around the full moon when all of the children just seem a little extra feisty that morning.
Or time changes.
Or time changes. Oh, that's the worst. It gets better once your kids are a little bit older, but it's still, even as an adult, annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, in those early years, it's rough going through time changes. So if it's a time change, really give everyone some grace.
Parents deserve some grace. Parishioners deserve some grace. I often remind myself that they are struggling in different ways than I am struggling.
They're on a journey too.
They're on their own journey. It is different than mine. My journey might be raising my children and teaching them how we act and behave and participate in the liturgy, and their journey might be learning how to understand how children act and behave and participate in the liturgy, and humbling yourself to realize that none of us are perfect. We should all just be trying our best.
And let the children come to him.
Amen. Thank you for tuning in to Veiled in Grace. We are an Orthodox women's lifestyle podcast. If you liked what you heard today, be sure to leave us a comment, subscribe to our channel so that you will get notified of our new videos. We are doing our best to upload a new video every other week. And be sure to share it with a friend, or if you're in an Orthodox women's group, so that other women can find us.
And feel free to also leave us a review if you're listening to this on a podcast platform that you might not be able to comment, but reviews will help it show up in the algorithms for us and be able to have more people find our channel. So we would appreciate that. And again, anything you want us to discuss, send it our way. We like hearing everyone's ideas. And in the comments below, let us know what have been your struggles or what kind of advice or anything we didn't mention. Put it in the comment section below.
Let us know if you're there with us.
Yes. Okay. God bless you. We love you.
Watch